Pepelwerk is proud to present Strategic Shift, a podcast dedicated to exploring the future of work. Thank you for joining us as we share stories of bold decisions and workforce innovations. In this inaugural episode, Dr. Ayers, coordinator for CTE programming with Little Elm ISD in Texas, joins the conversation to explore the evolving relationship between education and the future of work. The traditional model of education leading directly to a job is no longer a given. Adaptability is now essential. Dr. Ayers has been leading efforts to reimagine the education-to-career pipeline by building stronger collaborations between educators and employers. This is a crucial strategic shift. Tune in to hear how both educational and business leaders can benefit from investing in skilling over simply seeking ready-made talent.
I am so excited to have you on the show. You are actually the first guest on Strategic Shift. So it's an honor. I am so excited. Our first conversation, you got my brain going, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about some of the things that you talked about. And I'm so excited to share that with everybody else today. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm honored I'm the first guest.
Yes, that's going to be historic. Episode 1. I wanted to dive right into something that, and then I want to go back and ask you some questions kind of about your origin story a little bit. But something that jumped out to me is you said we've got 90% plus graduation rates, but only a third finish college.
Correct.
What happens to the 60% who don't? And why isn't anybody seeing this or talking about this?
Well, so here's going to dig into a whole slew of information. So as I had said before, especially here in North Texas, we have a high school graduation rate of usually in the mid 90s. And then as far as the TEA, the Texas Education Agency is concerned, they also want to look strongly at our matriculation rate, which here in North Texas, again, tends to be in the mid or high 90s. So, like say, maybe we have 94% graduating from high school, but 98% of those are going straight to college or some kind of postgraduate or post-secondary school of some sort, whether it's a trade school or a university or a junior college, whatever you want to call it. So we can definitely map those by school district and by campus, 100%. But the interesting thing is when you take a step back from school administration and you start looking at the bigger picture, and you look at the Texas Higher Education Board and their graduation rate, and they have a graduation rate within, I believe, typically a 4 to 6 year time period. You're looking at anywhere from private universities that have very elite requirements for getting into school, have about a graduation rate within that time period of about 24%. Then you go to the public education, and that's where we're starting to see that 36 to 38% graduation. So what happens to the other 60%? My best guess is that they are going straight into the labor force without having completed some sort of postgraduate education, because that's really what the hidden curriculum within public education, K-12 public education, is pushing kids to. Even though we no longer say we're pushing them to college, the fact of the matter is the system's still set up to push kids towards college. Now then, if I take it one step further, and someone who's a little bit more financially or accounting-wise, politically sound might be going, oh my God, that's 60% of our graduating class that are becoming unemployed. It's not entirely true. So here's the thing, and it's something I picked up on years ago. I started as a young educator. I was always curious, why is it that when we ever have any type of federal elections or even state elections, they start touting unemployment rates? And what I found out is that in the unemployment, let's just say you can make data do whatever you want it to do, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So whenever someone wants to get elected, they push either the Department of Education or some other agency to start offering more student loans to convince people to go back to school. You'll start seeing advertising from colleges and trade schools saying, "Hey, bored in your job, tired in your job, come on back and get an education. We'll get you placed." So then there becomes this big drive to getting people to go back into school. Now, this is well beyond that 24 to 38% I was talking about. This is like, you know, people who have dropped out and gone back to work or whatever. But what happens is as they start going into school, you can only count yourself as either a student or as unemployed,
Mm.
never both. So when unemployment rate goes up, they push to go to school, and as school goes up, unemployment rate goes down, and it looks amazingly impressive in the political arena.
Wow. So
But again, you go back to that graduation rate, that doesn't mean that people are graduating.
right. And in the middle of all this, the kids are sort of suffering to some degree with some of the games and the data shifting,
Political-
the political stuff. Yeah,
Yes.
this happens. Why? Well, I guess the better question is, what sparked this for you? What got you on the trail of this data? What got you engaged, like looking at this and then trying to solve for it?
So for that, we would have to back up about, let me do the math in my head, it'd be about 15 years. So at that time, I was a fine arts teacher. I just transitioned from teaching technical theater, which is everything except the acting, to being an actual visual art teacher. And I was teaching photography and, graphics and that sort of thing. And then I started hearing rumors that the TEA had this department. At that time, it was called CATE, Career and Technical Education. And anyway, they were starting to transform it, and I started hearing rumors that they were going to start taking over some of the fine arts classes. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. How can one department come in and just swoopingly take all the other classes and students out of, and if you're a fine arts person, you have this huge, I would call it pride, is probably more closely associated with hubris, about you living your own little fine arts world. But I was in terribly upset, and so I started doing all this research. It was about that time I started working on my doctorate, and anyway, I started doing the research, and what I found was that the career and technical education, which is where I'm at now, um, turns out that CTE does exactly what fine arts does, but it takes it one step further. If fine arts is pushing kids to the, for lack of a better term, spiritual enlightenment of expressing themselves and being creative, CTE says, yes, be creative and get paid while doing it.
Mhm. Got it.
So at that point, I started getting, like I said, I was starting my doctorate, and I started looking for research for papers and projects in school myself. And that's when I started looking at the labor market data because it's free. Anybody can go and download Department of Education labor. Even the Texas Workforce Commission publishes to the public.
Got it. Would you say that that people are receptive to some of your ideas? Because I know we talked about this before, where you said you tend to be so far ahead of the curve that you struggle with leaving folks behind. How does that
do.
work for you?
So I've had this problem ever since I was a kid in high school.
Hmm.
I was that student that was not bad in math. I was actually really good at math. My problem is I would get the problem, skip about 5 different steps, and go straight to the answer. And I would always get my hands verbally slapped saying, "JJ, no, you've got to go back and show the steps." And I'm finding as an adult that I'm falling into those habits again, that I'm getting where we need to be, but I'm not necessarily showing all the steps that someone would need in order to follow me. So, that's it's easier to say I just get so far ahead of the curve, I forget people are trying to follow me, and I turn around and I'm the only one standing. Um, and it's not entirely true. I mean, there are people who do follow along. I just tend to jump on a path and keep pushing.
What are some places right now where you're standing and looking out that you feel like you're a bunch of steps ahead and you're trying to get people to catch up with you right now?
Artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
I am a big proponent for using artificial intelligence to its fullest capability. Um, all the research I'm seeing and the evidence that I'm starting to see of its usage reminds me very much, and I'm going to date myself here, of when the internet came into being.
Mhm.
So, if in the beginning we just had computers, it was great. We had programs, we would buy software, we would do stuff in home or at school or at work. And then the internet happened and everything blossomed and we could communicate to each other. And what we saw was the internet took off at an exponential rate until we had that was it Enron, the .com bubble
Mhm.
burst, and that would have been in the 90s.
Yeah.
And what I'm afraid of is that do we follow the same pathway with artificial intelligence because it's taking off at an exponential speed? If we don't, if we're not careful, are we going to have another equivalent to a .com burst, and then it's going to wash out? Here's the interesting thing: when you talk to educators, they're all over the place. There's something called the innovation curve,
Mhm.
and it has to deal with a study of people are either early adopters or to the far extreme laggards, and they don't adopt, or they adopt really late. And again. This is my brain trying to put things together. Several years ago, I picked up, and you're going to laugh at this. I picked up a book on the history of the pencil.
Very interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing anything like this, so
So I was like, what is the history of the pencil? And I started doing research or reading it. And what I found was, so let's go back to the turn of the previous century, 1900, 1901. And up until then, all education was done with inkwells and quills or some kind of stylus or something, right?
mm,
Little Johnny getting in trouble for dipping Susie's pigtails in the inkwell. And here's the interesting thing. We had pencils, but they looked more like charcoal vines that artists used to draw with. Someone got the brilliant idea of wrapping this lead in wood and then putting an eraser on the end. Now then, there was in this book, there was a whole list of exclamations from teachers and professors at that time denouncing the use of the pencil
mm,
because now students will be able to cheat. They'll be able to erase their answers. They'll be able to, you could literally replace the word pencil with computer, and it would have been just as relevant when I read this book.
wow.
And so here's the crazy thing. So it went, you know, uh, for everything that about 15, 20 years ago, we were talking about Web 2.0 tools, and that mirrored the pencil. And then about 15 years in, something else happened. We had something else that was happening here in the United States, but it was also happening in the past. And someone had the brilliant idea of coming out with little chalkboards and chalk. And so these tablets became the rage of all educators for a little while. And again, they got met with resistance. No, they can erase their stuff. Someone else can erase their work. Won't be able to tell it. It's just akin to cheating. And again, if you take chalkboard and replace it with iPad, it's a tablet.
Mm, that's good. That is so good.
And so now let's skip ahead
Yeah.
again. So now we're facing, AI, and it's a big argument. Is artificial intelligence a way of cheating? Is it a way of ripping people off? And my thought is absolutely 100%. But it's not about if the tool can do something or not. A hammer can either build a house or break a window. Depends upon how you use it.
Mm.
So the AI, in my opinion, is the same thing. We have to focus on the ethics and teaching the students not necessarily not to cheat, but how to cheat more efficiently and ethically
Yeah.
at that.
Would you say, a lot of teachers that I've spoken with my own kids in their school, they are, I would say the majority are very resistant to AI for that very reason. They believe that it's going to take away critical thinking and that the kids aren't going to learn how to write and actually process anything because the AI is going to do the work for them. How do you see AI affecting the role of the educator in the classroom? And what do you do to like put those guardrails around it so it becomes just a tool that enhances the learning experience as opposed to taking over?
So the first thing I do when I'm talking to a teacher that's highly resistant is I start out with just asking questions. So if we took out all AI altogether, you know, regardless of the types, generative AI versus the focus, the narrow AI, ANI, and we just take artificial intelligence out completely, and most of them was like, yes, 100%, I agree. I'm like, so there goes spell check, there goes autocorrect, there goes the calculator.
Mm,
So artificial intelligence is not new. It's the artificial generative intelligence that we're starting to struggle with. And getting people to understand this is just the natural next step in the use. So when you're writing a paper or creating a lesson and you don't worry about your typing speed anymore.
right.
20, 30 years ago, you had to type, 35 words a minute, perfect, and zero errors on a typewriter. Well, now we have word processors that can immediately go back in and fix your grammar, fix your spelling, and we use it. We use it as a tool because the lesson is not about the grammar at that point. It's about the writing itself. And in this case, artificial intelligence is the same way. Why should a student have to, if their whole point of creating, let's say, a presentation with images, and we're beating them over the head with plagiarism and copyright protection, why shouldn't they go into Canva and use the built-in AI tool to generate images to put into a presentation?
Mm.
I mean, let's get past the stuff that the skills are bogging them down with and get to the actual learning.
Do you think there'll be a time, say 5, 10 years from now, where educators are starting to get replaced by AI teachers? You don't see
Ne-
that coming.
Never. Education has nothing to do per se with the content. It's about the interactions between people. You know, when you create something on your own, and whether you're 2 years old or you're 100 years old, you create something on your own, you're very proud, right? Let me ask you this. As a parent, do you think that you could do everything you do 100% by yourself?
No.
You have to have help
Mhm.
because it's not a matter of just physically being there or doing stuff, but is I have an idea, I check it against someone else that generates other ideas, and we go back and forth. And then the product of the sum of the product of both of us working together generates an amazing idea that we can move forward with.
Mm.
And that's how learning happens. That's called creating understanding or creating meaning. That's how Vygotsky, uh, 19th century uh, psychologist, said that we don't we can learn in isolation, but it's very limited. We have to have social interaction, and that's where the idea of social constructivism came up. So we're constructing our ideas, we're building knowledge together. That's why I would dare say that's why the internet was so impactful when it first came out, is because now you're not doing something in isolation in your home. You're doing it with someone from Europe.
Mm.
Someone with South America, down the street maybe, but you're working together in time periods that weren't normally, or either distance was a limitation or communication. Oh my God, let's go back to the idea of long distance phone bills. back in the day. Um, so it just made it easier for us to grow. And that's how information grew so fast. And now artificial intelligence is just that tool that helps us think a little bit better, a little bit faster. But as far as teachers go, if little Johnny and little Susie are having a problem, that can be behavioral. And AI can't solve behavior.
Mm.
It takes another human dealing with social emotional learning to understand what's happening and develop those coping skills within each of the students so that they can collaborate together.
Do you think, there are some communities that are hit harder by lack of funding. They have not only is it from the buildings and the equipment they have access to, but oversized classrooms, and teachers are overwhelmed by having to have, 40 kids in a room. How is that even possible for the teacher to do that? Do you think that use cases like that can really help enhance the teacher's experience and the student's experience if she had an AI companion?
Um, so the short answer is yes. The long answer is I think that's a misnomer.
Okay.
So I think the most productive classrooms are either the low socioeconomic because they get so much support,
Mm.
or the high end that are wealthy students and their parents are providing
Mm.
at home support that they're not getting in the school. I think the ones that suffer the most are straight in the middle. I hate to put it in classism, but look, the middle class.
Yeah.
Um, those of us who grew up in the 80s who were the latchkey babies. Mom and dad was still at work when we got home from school.
Yeah.
So I think AI can help them if it is structured correctly. And so when I got my bachelor's degree, I'll go back. It when I got my bachelor's, it was doable. When I got my master's, it was doable. When I started on my doctorate, I for the first time had an iPad. And for the life of me, I never understood how I survived my bachelor's and my master's without an iPad
Mhm.
because it facilitated my immediately writing notes and it was available on my phone and everywhere. And it was digitized and I could instantly look up research. I could pull up, I had tons of research at my fingertips. I had everything I needed right there in one spot. And so it makes me wonder if these kids, I mean, think about it. There's not a child under the age of, let's think back, no one under the age of 22 knows what a world without cell phones
Yeah.
looks like.
Mhm.
So, uh, what's it going to look like in the future? Artificial intelligence, maybe that's the future of tutoring. You know, hey, I'm not going to use that word. Hey, Bob, instead of Siri or Alexa. Hey, Bob, help me because I don't want to trigger anything
Exactly.
here. Hey, Bob, I'm having trouble with this math problem. And then the AI looks at the digitized version and has pre-programmed questions derived from lessons that it's scanned instantly, so milliseconds, and says, "Have you tried? What's the next step?" You know, and helps them so that if they're like I was when I was a kid and I was jumping 5 steps, I could get it in my head, but not everyone could. Some of that's the whole reason we have those steps put in place, right? Is so that they become stepping stones to a greater good. Maybe AI is then there to help the middle class take the next step.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the right words,
What
it
is that
becomes
next
not well, I'm not gonna say a foster mom or foster dad, but if mom and dad are at work all the time trying to make ends meet, and I'm not saying that the lower socioeconomic class isn't there, but you tend to, if you've studied language, you notice that the intimate forms of language that lower SES students use show that their family are there no matter what. They'll leave work in the middle of a shift to go home to take care of family. Um, and there's some kind of the familial obligation that gets lost in transition to that next socioeconomic class, it seems like, because it becomes about providing for the kids rather than being there for the kids.
Mm, that's a good one. That one reaches me personally, when you say that, because a lot of times as a parent, I struggle with that one where I know my kids need presence and they need the time. They just need me to be there with them. But I get so focused on the providing part, and
Yeah.
I see how that gap can happen. That's a great point. If you had, because you're on the front lines, you're seeing it, what's happening in real time. If someone said, "All right, here's the keys to the Texas education system," what would you do? What are some things you would do first to start to impact some of the things you're talking about?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would overhaul the structure of our academics. So, uh, where was I reading that? Self-determination theory. By Ed DC and Richard Ryan. They've developed something. They say that all intrinsic motivation comes from autonomy, competence, and relatedness in what we're doing.
Mm.
So, in that, when we start teaching English in isolation, there's no relativity. There's no relationship
Right.
with anything. So we're having to pull books out of novels. And now all of a sudden, think of today's political turmoil. All of a sudden, we're banning books left and right. So now what can we bring into those English classes? Well, in the gifted and talented program, we've started merging English and social studies together. So we're researching literature based in history and integrating some of that grammar and vocabulary development. Well, that's the only thing that I've seen done. So, what if we started doing the same thing with math and science?
Mm.
Math in isolation, I don't get it. What do you mean? What's parallel mean? What is, you know, different geometry terms, different proofs, theorems, and they just get lost on someone who's not a, for lack of better terms, raise my hand, geek or nerd, whatever you want to call us, that just love the minutia of that. They need something to relate it to understand it. So now maybe if we're talking about calculus level computations and we're seeing them in physics or even chemistry. Now, then that being said, all of that's still, in theory, pushing students to college because what's the next step? Well, it's the next level of academics, is next level of academics until you get to a point where we're graduating, what's left? Well, there's college, so there's another level of academics. So if instead if you start turning the focus more towards productive career, if and now we're getting into the whole definition, what is education, the purpose of education to begin with. But if it's truly to prepare students to be positive contributors to society, which is what I believe, then a contributor to society is not someone who goes to college and then comes back home and lives in the basement until they're almost 40. They're someone who goes out and finds a career that contributes to society. And so in this case, we get them to focus on a career for that relationship to what they're doing.
Mm.
How many times have you ever heard someone our age say, algebra, what's it good for? I've never used it a day in my life. Well, in reality, they just haven't connected the two to what it is. So we're not doing that practical application. So JJ, king of education in Texas, I would probably do a K through 12 career development. Now at the high school level, 9 through 12, we pretty well got that already handled with CTE. Middle school is sometimes districts have got it, sometimes it's lacking. But just like in Texas, where about 20 years ago, we realized technology was taking off and was an important part. The state of Texas created a K through 8, they called them technology applications. Uh, and it became a law that classrooms and districts had to implement these either as a standalone course or as integrated into the academics. And it just got relaunched again for this last year, saying it absolutely has to be done. They even revised the standards and everything. Well, what if we had done that with career development? What does career development look like in, say, the first grade?
Mm.
What does career development look like in the fourth grade? Maybe by the time they get to middle school, they understand what jobs and careers and some of those soft skills that we always throw at them, like grit, determination, resilience. They understand those, but they don't understand, how to get the careers they want. And so then the middle school becomes about finding how to get into those careers that they're interested in. Our parents' generation had one career their entire life.
Yeah.
Our generation, maybe two, maybe three for some of those of us who are a little bit more anxious in life. But these children are going to have probably anywhere from 3 to 5 careers in their lifetime. And they need to be prepared to know how to either find them or create them. Because from my understanding is the estimates are 85% of the jobs the kids in school right now will have in the future haven't even been created yet. 85%.
Wow. That actually sparks something, a memory of what you talked about on our previous call. And you said that below like 7th grade or below, I believe, you're not able to teach some of these things.
Right.
Why? It seems when you say this to me, it's like, yeah, it seems obvious when you say it. And I know you're probably saying this to other people. Why is that not happening?
Politics.
Okay.
Plain and simple.
What is it?
Right now, the way, at least here in Texas, the way it's structured is, and it always comes back to the money, right? The only place that we're allowed to spend CTE funding is from the 7th grade and up. So anything that's 6th grade or below falls into just normal academics. It becomes, if you have kids in elementary, they have the rotations where they're probably hitting music, art, PE, and then in theory, some kind of, at least here in Texas, some kind of technology for the tech apps. Sometimes they're going to the library to do that technology. Sometimes they're not. But it's up for the individual schools to report whether they're doing it or not. So this is something I usually talk to my teachers about. And this is something it's kind of a hidden curriculum in and of itself in Texas. So we have the Texas standards, right? The TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. By law, every teacher who teaches a class is required, that is one of 4 things they are required to teach in that class. The other 3 are college and career readiness skills, some kind of technology skills, and then, what's the other else? English language proficiency skills for our emerging bilinguals here in Texas. When you talk to a teacher, they don't know about the other 3. They know about their T's. And here's the thing. Who holds them accountable for covering every single one of those standards?
The state? Oh, no one?
A very astute administrator that might be observing the teacher, but they're not in the classroom every single day.
Yeah, I guess how would they monitor this at scale?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the old rule of 80. You've probably heard of the 80-20 rules, where 80% of what you need to accomplish is in 20% of what you do.
Yes. Pareto principle.
Right. So when you apply that to the standards, what does that say? 80% of the learning happens in 20% of the standards. So why would you even bother teaching the other 80% of the standards?
Ooh, that's good. So hold on. Let's unpack that a little bit, because
Yes.
what is the 20%? What do we know? Which pieces are actually impactful for the outcomes we're talking about? Specifically what you said, though, where I love that you said creating these these citizens that make a positive impact on society, if that's the outcome, I know that's the outcome for you, that's how you see education. Let's use that framework. Then which 20% would help produce that outcome?
So here's where it comes into a lot of trust. The trust that the people who wrote those standards knew specifically what needed to happen for that course at that grade level. And so when I teach teachers how to unpack those standards, they're literally looking at the verbs in the verbiage. And those verbs associate with something in Bloom's taxonomy, which is a hierarchy of how depth of knowledge that you're going into and how to generate creativity and authentic learning. So that's how a teacher knows, but there's a lot of trust in that whoever wrote those standards knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because in the experience I have in CTE, we spend our entire careers teaching academically trained teachers to become subject matter experts.
Okay.
Because realistically, we don't certify them to be subject matter experts. We certify them in the state of Texas to be educational psychologists that specialize in a certain field.
Got it.
That's the reason as a coach, let's say you're a football coach, you can teach history, and you know what? The next school doesn't need a history teacher, but they need a math teacher. Well, you're pretty good at math. You go take the test, you pass it, you're now a math teacher. Next school you're at doesn't need, social studies or math, but they need a science teacher. Well, you were good at math. Let me go test in the subject area of science. Now I'm a science teacher. So we spend our entire career making them subject matter experts. Whereas in CTE, unfortunately, we have the exact opposite. So more times than not, because we need someone, let's say we're teaching welding, we need someone who's a welder, a certified welder. So that means we're going out into industry, grabbing someone who is a subject matter expert. They've spent, 15, 20 years welding, and we bring them into the classroom, and then it becomes up to us to teach them about educational psychology. And, hey, Bob, slow down. That's a little bit too high scaled knowledge. They need their fundamentals before they can get to that sort of thing. Classroom management. These aren't your children. You can't just slap them upside the head. They're procedures you've got to follow, to keep them on track. So it's kind of interesting that, like I said, academic teachers, we spend their entire career teaching them to become subject matter experts, but CTE, we take subject matter experts and we spend their entire career making them into teachers.
Got it. How do you do it? How do you stay, because you're so positive. Your energy, your outlook, you're so hopeful. You see what's possible, which is probably part of the reason why you're always ahead, because you're just looking
Mhm.
out ahead at what's possible and researching that and developing ideas. How do you do it when there's so much resistance to breakthrough and challenges that are beyond your control? How do you stay in the seat and keep fighting?
You don't take it personally.
Hmm.
You know what? If everyone learns at their own pace, and that's not just applicable to students, it's applicable to adults as well. So if Mr. Smith is not ready to hear yet what I have to say and leading him to better classroom management, then maybe he needs to try a few more things on his own before he basically breaks down and says, okay, we'll try it your way, JJ. And that's fine. That it's not a personal attack on me. When someone comes at you with negative energy, they are reflecting themselves in what they're saying more than what you are actually being accused of doing.
You know, you got me thinking about, so my 17-year-old has a teacher who she absolutely loves. Incredible guy. He's passionate. He loves it. He makes it fun. All the kids are engaged. Um, they just love the way he teaches. However, he said something the other day to her that I think is perfect for having you here, because I want to ask you what your advice would be. So he said, there's so many things I would do differently if I could, but the stuff I have to go through to try to make change in the school makes it almost impossible. So I just throw my hands up. And I would imagine there's a lot of teachers and educators, even administrators out there trying to push change and would align with a lot of what you're saying, but they just don't know how to make a difference. And then some of them burn out in that process and some of them quit. And so you lose some really wonderful human beings who had the right mission and mindset, and they go away because they just can't figure out how to move the needle. What would you say to someone who's in that position?
Um, Again, I don't believe in a no-win scenario. So to me, it's if one way doesn't work, try another way. Thomas Edison said he did not fail to make the light bulb 1,000 times. He just found 1,000 ways it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But it only takes one.
Mm.
So it's the same in education. It's just a problem. There's nothing personal. It's easy to associate emotions to frustration whenever you're dealing with something that you're passionate about. But it's in some cases, like the teacher you're talking about, first thing I would ask is, what's the culture like in the campus? If the campus is a lockstep, it's the admin's way, because I've seen campuses like that.
Mhm.
It's their way or the highway. Well, maybe it's time to look at the highway.
Yeah.
There's more than one way, more than one campus out there.
Yeah.
And then I've been on campuses that the administrators literally said, try anything you need, but have a backup plan.
Ooh,
So if you fail, that's fine, but I want to know what you're going to do to make it right.
I like that culture.
So exactly. So then that translates into the instruction with the kids. How are you how are you setting that same type of risk culture up in your classroom so the kids can try and inductive theory, how they're inducing all these different thoughts, knowing that, it's the shotgun approach. It only takes one to actually work to make a difference.
I love that. I feel like folks need to hear from people like yourself more often. I think they can get caught in like their own little silos inside their schools. And hearing more voices like yours just gives a little spark, a little inspiration, a little bit like, yeah, you're right. I can stay in. I can try more ways. I can, it's energizing. So I'm super excited to get this message.
And we should probably take it one step further.
Okay.
If you're trying to do this alone, maybe that's part of your frustration.
Mm,
Maybe that's where AI comes in. Maybe that's where another teacher comes in. The smartest person in the room is not you, it is the room.
mm.
So get in a room with other people, with other ideas, and grow.
That's a huge one. Teamwork, find some folks, some allies,
Yeah.
so you're not alone. I love that. I know that you're technology forward person in this system. What are some ways that you are using technology that you're seeing wins, that you're seeing some really exciting outcomes? Specifically, and AI is just such a hot topic.
Yeah, I've actually been presenting all over Texas, and I just proposed to start offering a summer workshop with CTAT, which is our state association for CTE,
Mhm.
Career and Technical Association of Texas, and about using AI in curriculum writing. What a lot of people don't realize is with all again, it's all the political hullabaloo that tends to confuse us from what really is happening. So it even confuses teachers. When I go to my teachers and say, "Hey, we need to write a curriculum for your class," there's a lot of times when the teachers say, "Well, didn't we just buy that from such and such?" And I'll say, "That is a great resource, but is not your full curriculum." And more times than not, they're like, why isn't it my curriculum? I use it like curriculum. I say, and what happens if budget cuts or that company goes out of business or whatever, 1,000 different scenario what ifs. What are you going to fall back on? If you can no longer log into that account, what are you going to fall back on? If we have nothing written down, then we don't have a curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And so even my engineering teachers who, we teach a lot of Project Lead the Way type courses. I think everyone here in Texas knows what Project Lead the Way is. It's one of the leading curriculum providers for engineering here in Texas. That even those teachers like JJ, we've got it, we'll log in. I'm like, well, what happens if we no longer have it? What are you going to teach from? You just going to come in and punt?
Yeah.
Use a football term there, but what are you going to do? You need something to be able to fall back on. Even if that written curriculum is, this is what we're covering, this is what we're doing, and here's the resource. I know we can't copy and paste from, copywritten material, but it might be a hyperlink to lesson 4.1 inside this course.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is because curriculum writers are frontline and foremost the people who have to be well-versed in the 3 different areas of learning. That's where I have to be a little bit more selective in my training, in selecting them to write that curriculum. They may use AI to fill in the gaps where they don't know, and that's what I teach them because I even confuse other academically trained teachers when I use the word pedagogy. Most of them know that term. Pedagogy, it's teaching. Yeah, it's about teaching children. It's teacher driven. So then there's andragogy, which is adult driven, which is if I explain to you why this is important, you'll see the why and you'll want to help and finish it. But then there's a third, which is eudagogy, which is self driven by the student themselves. Little Johnny wants to go and start his own food truck. What's stopping you?
Yeah.
What do you need help with?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get you started? And that's a learning in and of itself. Last year alone, I had a senior graduate from our welding program that his senior year, he was fully versed in that eudagogy. He went out and bought a dually truck with a trailer with a portable welding unit and paid the entire thing off his senior year just from working side jobs in the evenings and on the weekends.
Nice.
So, I mean, those are the success stories we want to hear. But until our teachers know how to get them from engagement to empowerment, that's where we've got to just keep building. And the AI, where I've been teaching the teachers, is you may not know the difference between the two. I mean, you do ethically, but you don't know how to get them there as a teacher. So AI can help do that. And let me show you how to generate your requests for AI to help you write it down. And the thing is, best example I can give is everyone knows how to build a house, right?
I mean, conceptually.
I mean, essentially,
Yes.
yeah, you know how a house works.
Yeah.
You know how you do repairs at home, probably. Why do we need blueprints?
Right. Nice.
So that's basically what lesson plans and this curriculum writing is these are the blueprints that, let's say, God forbid, Mrs. Jones slips because it's pouring down rain and she breaks her leg and she's out for 2 weeks. Well, what's that sub going to teach?
Mm.
Well, if you have written curriculum, as the teacher, you're going to easily pull lessons straight out of that curriculum and send them to the sub. The students don't need to suffer because the teacher had some kind of unavoidable life event.
Yeah. Can you, what are some of the tools that you would recommend to an educator that you actually have used and you've seen are effective in helping both the student and the educator level up?
Ooh, The big one on the educator side is I tend to use Magic School AI, and I show that as an example to my curriculum writers because it keeps a log of everything they're requesting, and they can copy and paste it straight into their curriculum. Um, for those teachers who wind up finding out that they have students that need a little bit more, what we call MTSS, the tier 1, 2, and 3 levels of instruction. Tier 1 is everyone, tier 2 is small groups, and tier 3 is a one-on-one, is the basic breakdown.
Okay.
Your special needs students tend to be that tier 3 because they need a little bit more attention. But for an academic teacher or even a CTE teacher who doesn't know how to break it down quite that well, Diffit, Diffit.me, allows you to take presentations and create worksheets, all these different levels of differentiated instruction responses
That's
to help. On the flip side, for a student, I would obviously they're already using stuff like Grammarly online, but I would also suggest something for the higher education kids, Mendeley,
Hmm.
Mendeley. It allows you to create, it's free, and it allows you to create a repository of resources that has a Microsoft Word reference built in. So as you're typing, and I found this when I was working on my dissertation, as you're typing, you're like, oh, I pulled this from such and such book. You can literally click and find the book and it inserts it.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And then at the very end, insert bibliography and it lists every citation you've listed throughout the entire document.
Amazing.
So that helps me as a writer, and it would help others who are writing at that level. And you can choose APA or MLA or whatever writing style you want. I would also recommend some of the AI tools in either Photoshop or Canva for those visual AI. And that's interesting. It's in itself because that is in such a baby stage right now of developing. It's so prone to hiccups and hallucinations.
Yeah.
There's literally a thing called AI hallucinations.
Yeah.
So, the person walking down the street with 3 legs.
Yeah.
So, but it's always good to see some of those because some of the not the generative image, but some of the other AI tools built in, such remove shadow, remove background. Those are amazing for students who are trying to change things, especially when you start shifting your point of view as a teacher from plagiarism to copyright.
Mm.
Because we're past the age of just worrying about if a kid's copying and pasting text. We're at the age where are they copying and pasting images that someone else, are they stealing someone else's livelihood?
Right. Got it. Would you say any of these tools would be useful for the administrator or the decision maker that wants to make things a little easier for their teachers? They want to open up opportunity and possibility for teachers to use these tools?
I think yes, but right now most school districts have some form of AUP, which is authorized user profile, which says you're not going to go. It's basically what you agree to on the internet.
Mm.
So if we say the internet and AI are two different things, if we've got an authorization form for internet, we're not going to go to porn sites. We're not going to docs. We're not going to. What do we have for the AI? And I'd be willing to bet that most school districts don't have a solid AI uh, anything,
Right.
any type of limitations, policies. And just like with library books, it might be easier to just ban it than to teach students how to use it.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. At least at the teacher level and the student level, there are some tools they can start leveraging. What if think of this episode going out into the world, if you could plant one seed in someone's mind, what would your hope be about what we talked about?
That's a tough one. Probably should have given me that one an hour ago. Uh, I would probably say always look to the future
Mm, love that. I love it.
because we don't know what the next thing will be.
Yeah, that's great. That makes so much sense coming from you because you're always having to like look behind you to say, "Come on, guys, like let's go. Follow me. Let's go." Because you're kind of out there already. So
Yeah.
that's great. That's wonderful. I had a question that I was going to ask you earlier and I forgot and I just saw it. I would love to know one belief about education that you wish more people challenged.
That any okay. And because I literally came across this a couple of weeks ago.
Hmm.
Uh, and the belief I would have them challenge would be that if those who can't do teach, because
Ooh.
that uh, it gets under my skin. Because as a student of education myself, I think it's just the opposite. Those who can't teach do, because it's about the conscious and unconscious competency of what we're doing. When you're teaching someone else how to do something, you know it so well. How is it Einstein put it? If you know a subject well enough to put it in the simplest of terms, you truly understand it.
Mm,
But if you don't know, you're just unconsciously competent. You know how to do it. You know how to do it well, but you can't explain it to someone else. That's someone who can do but can't teach.
that's that is the first time I've heard that flip. That is fantastic answer. Where can people follow your work and support what Little Elm's building?
Um, I'm not as active as I should be.
Mhm.
I do periodically post to my LinkedIn profile,
'Kay.
that you're welcome to post. Um, I there for a while I was heavy into at that time was Twitter, but I just haven't found the time to post stuff continually because I found myself continually bogged down with the work rather than posting what has been accomplished.
Right.
And that's one of my pitfalls right now. As I'm getting older, I'm noticing that I'm more obsessed with just getting it done
Mhm.
than chatting about
About it. Yeah.
what we've accomplished.
Yes.
My my administration asked me like, JJ, what is CTE doing? You're not posting anything. I was like, well, does it matter that we've increased our certifications in the last 2 years by 400%?
Mm.
Does it matter that 82% of our graduating class has some type of certification showing that they're ready for careers outside of, high school? So yeah, there are things I could be posting about. I just get so caught up on the day to day of getting it done
Right. Actually
that I
making
forget,
impact.
which is why I loved being on this podcast with you today.
Yes. And I was gonna say that my hope for you is that you get an opportunity to share a little more about how you see things and your
Mhm.
lens of education. I think is critical and can make a big difference. And like you just said, um, you have a gift to teach and tell stories because the way that you share this information has given me so many light bulb moments. So it's a testament to your ability to tell great stories and teach people. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I hope that we get an opportunity to see more of you out, even if it's an article here and there, or I know it's hard to slice out time to do it, but I think it could help a lot of
I
people.
And the closest thing I can say is I'm currently working on a book, but it's more written for those who want to go into education as teachers,
Oh,
how to become an effective storyteller, for lack of better terms.
wonderful. So you're going to catch them on their way in before they build up calluses and all the things that happen in the game.
Oh yeah,
That's fantastic. Anything that anyone who's watching, they may want to support Little Elm or anything that you're working on? Is there a way that they can support if they're in your community?
Right now, our biggest thing is we're focusing on esports, engineering, and drones, and our nursing program. We just had 45 of our students become certified nursing assistants.
Congratulations.
So thank you.
Awesome. You are doing fantastic work. I am so honored to have you on here today and spend the time talking to us all. And I'll post some of this, the LinkedIn. I'll post that in the description so folks can at least follow your journey. And if you can post here and there, I'm sure they'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. I will do my best.
Yes, you heard it. You heard it here first. Thank you, sir. Have a fantastic day, and thank you again for the time.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to Strategic Shift so you never miss an episode. Tune in next time as we meet Kim Kelly, founder and CEO of Pepelwerk, as we explore how to shift from traditional hiring models to valuing people based on their natural attributes, adaptability, and ability to contribute. You won't want to miss it because, as Kim says, those unwilling to evolve will be left behind. Embracing change is the only way forward.